Welcome to Focus on Albany. My guest today is my dear friend Leon VanDyke. And Leon VanDyke, we're going to have another discussion about the brothers. So, you said that you guys came from different backgrounds and you all were a tight knit group and more or less family. So, tell us a little about the different members of the group. That would be nice.
Yeah, there's such a wide assortment of guys that I thought about it last week or so. Over the years, I thought about this. I mean, you had people at the core group of 20, 25 guys that were there almost every day,
Mhm.
involved as much as they could. Um, and about their character, even though they were wide, separate groups, they were men of principle, you know? And you had guys who had been in the chain gang in Parchment in Mississippi that did time on the chain gang. Guys who had high school dropouts from urban areas and from rural areas. Sam McDowell, who was one of the leaders in the Which Brothers, he came from North Carolina,
Mhm.
a small town of maybe 2,000 people. And then you had guys like Ron Daniels, who was a doctoral student at SUNY and came from Columbus, Ohio, rather, excuse me, Columbus, Ohio. Ron Brown, who was a chemist at GE, he was one of the first Black chemists. So you had this wide assortment of guys, and I think what, what, what brought them together was the movement. And Cynthia, uh, I come to find out they have to be involved over these years and involved in neighborhood groups and pickets and demonstrations. The brothers, that was true of neighborhood organizations throughout the country. When I went out to Chicago for the Urban Training Center, they had an organization called the West Side Organization, run by a guy by the name of Chester Robinson, who had,
Any relation to Obama's wife?
I don't know, it could be, it could be, I don't know. Chester passed away, but anyway, this was the same kind of neighborhood group. If it was not for that West Side organization supporting Martin Luther King when he came to Chicago, it would not have been as successful. But one of the commonalities in terms of, I want to talk about principles. When we were picketing the Union Hall, as I mentioned that earlier, and the Union Hall business agents and officers, they were no stage joke. They were guys that you did not mess around with. They had connection with the Banana family, the Mafia family in New York City, and they had connections with the Mafia family in Buffalo. And the machine's treatment of people who oppose him is well known, so I'm not going to bore you with those details. But I just want to give you, we were picking, and we've been picking about 2 or 3 days, and we were getting all kinds of threats of what they would do if we continued. But there was this guy, this construction guy, black construction guy, and he came up to Robert Gene Dobbs, my partner in crime, and asked Robert Gene, "Why are you guys picketing?" So Robert Gene, and of course they pointed to me, asked Leon. So I said, he came in, and we thought that uh, that if we were going to be attacked, that would be by some blacks that the union paid. So, and I thought that this gentleman that came up to answer the question, that this was the opportunity, this may be one of the guys that would start that. So he asked me that, and I told him why, what you call it. So he says to me, "You're right. Give me a sign." So he took the sign. After we'd always finished picking about 8 o'clock. During that time, the Union Hall was building the extension to the temple. This guy that I was telling you about, he put down the sign, picked up his lunch pail, and went and started working on the site. And the guy I'm talking about is Sam McDowell. And this was how Sam was. If he thought something was right, he would die for it. And this was typical, and I can tell you a number of stories about different brothers, the kind of people these guys were. And that was not, as I said, this is not just the brothers I found. This is happening throughout the country, because this is a time whose idea had come. The other thing, which was maybe unique to the brothers, was their sense of humor. Some people would describe gallows humor. Some people would say wry humor. What was funny then, and when I think about it and try to explain it, I think you had to be there in order for it to be funny. But they would make a joke out of anything, and it sort of eased the tension. I think that's.
Let me ask you this question, Leon. You said that there was a core group of like 25 people, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so how many of those people were native Albanians?
Probably not many.
Really?
Because that's typical of the Black community. What we're talking about during that time, we're talking about the end of the great so-called migration, where Blacks were, for the last 40 years, were, I say, fleeing from the terror of the Klan to come north and also look for jobs. The common way to describe that is that they came looking for jobs rather than terror. I think it was the terror when you think that there was over 5,000 lynchings of Blacks from the 1860s to the 1950s every year, not 5,000 like the year. I misspoke. That's terror. That is terror. It's almost like saying, describing, say, 50 years from now, the reason why the Ukrainians left Ukraine was to look for jobs is ridiculous. And it's just as ridiculous, I think, for the historians to describe the Great Migration, where 6 million Blacks left the South. And I would describe that they left the South, because of the terror that they were facing. So
now, one other question. I know that there was a population that wound up in the pine bush, and they were from Mississippi. Would you say the majority of Black people that migrated up to Albany were from Mississippi? Because they have a Mississippi Day once a year right in Lincoln Park.
Yeah, well, there's a number of some of the big churches. The history of that is Wilburn Temple Church,
Okay.
And the Parson family, and it's a large historical family in Albany. And then there's the McCanns, which is another. They came from Mississippi in part because of Joe Frangella's mushroom plan. Joe Frangella used to be the Republican chairman of the party years ago in the 60s. Then somebody else came to do it. His name slips my mind. But they came north, and which was typical. In Philadelphia, the large percentage of Blacks, so I'm going back now, when I was a kid, came from Virginia. What have you. So I would say Mississippi probably is the largest contingents in Albany.
Uh-huh.
And there are other groups that would argue that, and they're associated with the various different churches. So you have some of the churches wherein the pastors came up, and they were from North Carolina. Sam McDowell, the McDowell family, the Dobbs family. I would say in terms of the brothers, the Dobbs family came from Mississippi, Tupelo, Mississippi, a lot. So yeah, they had Family Day. There's about 3 or 4. There's I think it's the McCanns, who they used to have a Family Day, and I used to go to it almost in the 60s. I started going to the 60s. I used to go to it almost every year.
Mm-hmm.
2 of the founders of the brothers were McCanns.
Okay.
So yeah, the Wilburn Temple Church is probably the oldest Black church that the people came from Mississippi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were talking about, and I'm sorry I cut you off, but
that's quite all right.
You were talking about the humor amongst you guys.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like, I remember Martin Luther King Jr. when he died. We were picketing in front of City Hall. You had signed that Martin Luther King died for you. Well, anyway, Pete Jones, who was one of the leaders, he was attacked coming up to the rally. This was at night. He was attacked, and the guys jumped out. And so then one of the fellows said, I'm not quite sure who it was, said, "Are you trying to get your name in the paper again, huh?" to Pete Jones about being attacked. And we'd laugh about it, and Pete Jones would have some retort, But that was the way how these guys dealt with humor. But it's not unlike when I hear people talk that were in the service and were in the war, that they would have this, as I said, gallow kind of humor.
Did you have a lot of humor about Erastus Corning?
Uh, that's a great questions you're asking. Uh, Undoubtedly, I right now you caught me off guard with that one.
I'm
Uh,
sorry.
no, that's fine. That's fine. It's fair. So, yeah, there was a lot of humor about there, or humor, not just about the mayor, but about our reaction to him, and also Dan O'Connell. The thing more about Dan O'Connell, because at that time in the 60s, O'Connell had total control. Mayor Corning certainly was up there, but he was like a junior or senior lieutenant.
Okay.
He wasn't a power, sort of a power to be. You know, he was someone who Dan O'Connor would say, would call him in and tell him to stop fooling around and woman chasing.
So it was O'Connell that had held all the power, is what you're saying.
O'Connell held all the power and he was unchallenged. Now, as he got older, more and more he divided that power with some of his junior lieutenants, and Mayor Corning was no question that Mayor Corning was one of those, you know. But most people, when they thought about, well, we were picking the construction halls, or we were picking doing the rent strikes, it was Dan O'Connell who was the powerhouse, and he had a whole and he had a whole Dan. His power came from the support of the ethnics, and mostly Irish, who supported Dan unquestionably, because Dan was there in the 20s and 30s when they had signs, Irish don't need to apply in this country. You know, and Dan and his brother, you could say they were the Irish brothers of their day. They became the champion for the Irish people, or sort of, rightfully or not. So the machine was based on the support of the Irish Catholics and the church and all that. That was the core. That was their core support. So the challenge then. I mean, I remember this is like 67, 68, where they would have these annual meetings, Democratic Party meetings, to elect the chairman, and their pride was how they could get Dan elected. The time it took Dan to get re-elected chairman, and I think the last thing was sort of like from the nomination to the time he got the vote, it was like maybe 1 minute. They pride themselves on that. That each year they would shorten and shorten it. But that but so it is not that the taking anything from Mayor Corning, or that he was second banana. But when you do the second banana to a person who's literally is God, that ain't too bad a position.
But so you raised an interesting point just now. You were saying that O'Connell pulled the strings, and in City Hall, did O'Connell pull the strings?
He
And
pulled the string in every aspect of Albany. This is when the Democrats didn't have any challenges in the county. around about the mid-60s, it began to have a challenge that they begin to elect Republicans in the county as opposed to the city. City, forget about it. But no, Dan was all powerful, and everybody knew it. And one, I think it's 112 State Street, where the Albany County headquarters. The power came out of there to City Hall, not the other way around.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, when you think Dan selected Corning to be mayor in 1940. This is a young man that didn't know. I mean, he was from a patriarch, aristocratic family. His grandfather was, I think, lieutenant governor, all these kinds of things. And Corning's father and Dan O'Connell were tight. They were friends. They were political allies. When Corning, I think he gets elected to president in 1940, a lot of this stuff I'm talking about now is out of Bill Kennedy's book, Oh Albany, and another dissertation by a guy by the name of Bill Rowley, who was a professor at State University English department, and was also a journalist for the Times Union, who wrote a lot about this. I always tease my friend Paul Grandau as being the reincarnation of Bill Rowley. But no, everything went through the Democratic Party committeeman system.
Okay.
If you want to be a teacher, in the school, you had to get a blue card or red card or whatever they call it. You had to get it from your committeeman. Then you would be considered, not necessarily hired, you would be considered. And that was whether it was a police force or, and you must remember during that time what I'm talking about, which is, my daughter talks about the Stone Age. During that time when I'm talking, I'm talking about, there were no unions. There was no teacher union. The board was appointed. The school board was appointed by the machine, by Corning. There are no firemen. The firemen, there was no union. All these things in Albany is revolutionary. Though they had unions in cities around the country. In Albany, they were so powerful that they were able to keep these unions out to maybe in the 70s or 80s. It was and even once you got unions, they still were. Ciccarelli, who was president of I think it was Ciccarelli, she was president of the teachers union for, I don't know, a long time. She was part of the machine. New machine, I call it the new machine, the old machine. So you had almost at that time complete control, and that was in the hands of one man, Dan O'Connell. And then when Dan died, there became a fight between the various different factions, and Corning won.
Who were in the different factions?
There's Charlie Ryan, the Ryan brothers.
Okay.
That was one of them. I'm not quite sure, my memory eludes me. the Breslins.
Oh, okay.
These were the Young Turks then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, McNamee was on the other side. He was assemblyman. He was on. He was. I think he was with the Ryans or with the Corning.
Who's that?
McNamee, Jack McEnany,
Oh, McInerney.
who was
Okay.
our Jack McEnany. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can mess up names in a heartbeat. Uh, but you had, I may have, that confuses who's who. So you had to double check me. Don't quote me in vain. But there was these factions. There was the Connors, Dick Connors, who was
Right.
he was with the Corning faction. So you had these uh, 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 two or three factions. The president was what you call him. There was another. I can't think of the other 70 senator. Um, but anyway, so but Corning faction won, and then Corning took his rightful place as the head of
So
uh,
when Corning became the head of the Democratic machine, did things change a lot?
not
Oh,
really,
okay.
because I don't think the thing from my perspective, is like Dan O'Connell was revered by these people. You know what I mean? So that
Mm-hmm.
he may have had the challenge in the early part. I doubt it. Which, and I say this also. I used to, from time to time, George Harder, who I sure you know, used to go and visit Polly Noon.
Mm.
Polly would tell me all these stories, and she really thought she sort of got. She said, Dan liked you guys
Mm.
because you reminded him of him. And I said, oh yeah. Why didn't I ever? Why didn't none of us ever had that sense that he liked us? I don't know why. I never got
Well,
this.
well, Leon,
Yeah.
a half hour goes by real
Oh,
quick.
yeah.
So we'll schedule another show. So you've been listening to Focus on Albany. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my special guest is my good friend Leon VanDyke. So if you
Thank
like
you.
this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks, Leon. We'll schedule another show, soon.
Yeah, you guys. We had